Okay, before I go into Philippians 1:14, I want to cover an additional note on Philippians 1:13. Okay, so I want to cover this word palace. It's a word praetorian in the Greek, and it's significant for the stuff that we're going to be looking at. I'm going to be covering in the rest of the book of Philippians, and I didn't have time to really get into it when I was teaching verse 13. So I want to just add this to it. It'll be an additional teaching on verse 13. Okay. Now, the word palace is the word praetorion, okay, in the Greek, and I want to read it out of, just hang in here with me. I know this is could be dry material, but it's important. It's usually not taught this way, so I want to show it to you. It's in the Strong's. If you look at it, I've got my app here. There's three definitions for it, or it's used three ways, okay? One, it says in the Strong's, headquarters. In a Roman camp, the tent of the commander-in-chief, all right? So that would be the barracks or the residence of the military commander, okay, of the Roman army, okay? So that's what that would be, the headquarters, okay? Number two, it says the palace in which the governor or procurator of a province resided, okay? And that would be the provincial governors. It wouldn't refer to the emperor, the Caesar. Now, it was later, during the time that Paul wrote this, it wasn't used to, in reference to the residence of the emperor, okay, or of Caesar. It wasn't used that way, and I'll tell you why. Later on, I think right around the 3rd century, it was used that way. They used it commonly, the main residence of the emperor was commonly called Praetorian, okay, but not when Paul was writing, all right? And they also did, let's see, what else do we have here? They also used that provincial residence of the provincial governors, okay, of provinces. They would use that place where the governor of that province lived. They would use that as the judgment hall, okay, where they would do judgment, and they would hear, listen to accusations against the Roman law and whatever in the province, and it would be called a judgment hall, okay. So that would be the other use of it. So we've got headquarters of the Roman camp, that's military, their barracks, and then the place where the provincial governors lived and also did judgment, okay, there. They would do judicial hearings in that one place. And then number 3, the camp of the Praetorian soldiers established by Tiberius, okay. So it would be the barracks of the imperial emperor's soldiers. They're called Praetorian Guard, okay. And I'll read you what Praetorian Guard were. But now, in the King James, it translated it castle, referring to the residence of Caesar, okay? But that's not what it refers to in this verse, okay? And practically everywhere you go, anything you study, you'll find that they make reference to that it's a place, and they try to find out where it is, so they come to the conclusion it could be that, or it could have been one of the other places in the other areas where Paul had been had stayed, okay, or been held under arrest, okay. I think Caesarea was one of them. You can study that out. But they're usually concerned about where, okay, he was, or where he was during the writing of Philippians, or Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. But that's not the emphasis here. I'm going to be teaching. I want to show you it's not where, but who, okay? Who were the Praetorian? It's a different emphasis, and it fits more with what we're looking at, okay? So the other thing about, there's one more fact there I want to say why it couldn't have been the Caesar's residence, is because during the time that Paul was writing this epistle, there was an image that they were really guarding, basically, when it came to the Roman Empire. Okay, and one of the things they did not want to, they wanted to represent the Roman Empire as a republic. Okay, that the Roman citizens were free citizens. Okay, it was very important in the Roman Empire to emphasize that fact that the Roman citizens were free citizens. They had the right to be of trial and to be judged according to Roman law. And they did not want to represent the emperor as a military despot or a tyrannical military ruler that ruled the Roman citizens. Okay, so they avoided that. Now later it became that way, but during the first century or during the time Paul was there, they would have never referred to the residence, Caesar's residence where he lived, as a Praetorian, okay? Because it would have given the wrong image to the Roman citizens, okay? So I kind of dug this up in research and everything, so I want to share it with you, okay? So, when Tiberius established the Roman, this Praetorian Guard, okay, and they called it the barracks of the Praetorian Guard, alrighty? So it was, most of it had to do with a military barracks there in Rome, okay? Because they would have their barracks there either in Rome or outside their camp would be somewhere else. But the other thing that it refers to is actually the soldiers themselves, okay? They were called Praetorian Guard. So during the time when Paul wrote this, the Praetorian Guard were called Praetorian, okay? So that's the way I'm going to teach this. This is what I wanted to show you, that in this verse, most likely it's referring to the guards, the Praetorian Guards, that were guarding Paul during the 2 years of house arrest, okay? Even though he was waiting to be, for an appeal before Caesar, the emperor, he had to wait. It was 2 years. He was still under arrest, okay? And so I want to go through and I'll show you that. So I'm going to give you a definition of what the Praetorian Guard were, okay? I dug this up too in research. So I'm going to read it to you. This is what the Praetorian Guard were. 10,000 soldiers, originally of Italian birth, okay? So they were Roman citizens originally. But later they came from other places. They formed the Imperial Guard, or we would call them National Guard, okay? So they're soldiers, military. The Apostle Paul was bound and chained by a soldier which was part of the Praetorian Guard, okay? Since guard, in other words, where you're assigned to be guarded, okay, by one of these soldiers, and it's called the guard. Since guard was revolved and changed regularly, it wasn't long before all the Praetorian Guard was aware of Paul's bold stand on the word, okay? Isn't that interesting? So this verse most likely was referring to the guards during that 2-year period that had come in and been switched out, and they had lived with Paul and got exposed to the gospel of the mystery of Christ, okay, that Paul preached. He was very bold about it. So by the time he was writing Philippians, all the Praetorian Guard, the barracks, everybody of these men, these Roman citizens, these guards, these soldiers, he had made it, the gospel had made an impact on him, okay? And then it was also impacting the other believers in Rome. And, in a 2-year period, from one little own hired house, we see revival breaking out. Not only in Rome, but also the word got out through these epistles. And, if you haven't figured it out by now, that's why I'm doing this teaching, okay? This series on Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians, because that is the crescendo revival of the first century, okay? We're looking at details of it and what brought this about, okay? What were some of the things, what are the details of this revival? And that's what we're looking at verse by verse, and God just has to show it to us, okay? Because if we want revival, we know it doesn't come from some huge compendium church, located in Rome, or something like that, or any other city, or some, apostolic network, or all these, jive terms we get with a mind picture that might not even be close to what really happened. We're looking at one little house, and we're looking at revival breaking out, dynamic revival, okay, in Rome, because we want to see what God has recorded for us to teach us the real deal, to clear it up and get clarity on what's really at the basic bottom line of revival and what God calls revival, okay? So we're looking at it. Now here's a literal that was put together by a research team, some of the stuff I was studying quite a long time ago. But here's like a translation, literal, of Philippians 1:13 that I found. It's pretty neat. Okay, here it is. Thus my bonds have been publicized throughout all the Praetorian Guard and to everyone else as being associated with my stand in Christ. Pretty awesome, huh? So by the time he was writing Philippians, all the Praetorian Guard, the barracks of the guard, we're talking about 10,000 guard. Now, there might not have been that many right there in Rome, but whatever it was there, the word had gotten out, and a lot of these soldiers believed. They'd become believers, okay, by this time. So Paul being under house arrest for 2 years in one little house sparked the most amazing revival that's even reached in unto us 2,000 years later, okay? And we're digging in to find out what was it all about. What was the essence of this revival? What was being preached? What was being carried? What was being lived? What was the glory of this gospel that was living and that went completely all over the world, and anyhow, so that's what we're looking at. Now, one of the things, if you do any kind of study like online or whatever, you find a lot of people kick around and like push back on this notion, on the truth of it, as far as we know. That's the most valid, explanation of this, that Paul was actually under house arrest for 2 years. And, you'll just see a lot of different things taught. But what would validate 2 years in his own hired house and still being under chains, okay? Being under what we call house arrest, having the Praetorian Guard, in other words, National Guard soldiers, be assigned and then shift the guard every so often of what soldier would be in there, making sure that Paul was still wasn't going to escape, okay? So under the Roman law, any soldier or anybody that was guarding someone under arrest was pretty strict, okay? Even though Paul was he was a free citizen, Roman citizen, and he was waiting to bring his case before Caesar. He was still under arrest, okay? He was under arrest and he was considered a prisoner, all right? So I want to show you a couple of verses that I have, and you can, just for your information, to show you that the reason he was there for 2 years, and he was still treated like as a free citizen, but yet held under arrest by the Praetorian Guard according to all their codes of conduct and the law requiring them to keep the prisoner and not let him escape, okay? And why would they go such drastic measures to keep him chained even though he was in his own hired house, all right? So I'll show you the two verses I've got for him appealing to Caesar. Now, Acts 25:11. I'm just going to give you these references and I'll read them quickly here. I know this is just facts, but it's important, and it'll come into play for the rest of the stuff we're going to be looking at in Philippians. Okay, Acts 25:11. Here's the verse. For if I be an offender or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. In other words, I'll take my punishment, okay, under Roman law. This is what Paul's saying. But if there be none of these things whereof these accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. So he's, taking his stand. I appeal unto Caesar. Okay, so Paul declared, I think, to Festus, whoever it was he was talking to here in Caesarea, he said, I appeal unto Caesar. Okay, so this is where he was taking his case all the way to the top, the Supreme Court of the Caesar himself. Okay, in Acts 26:32 says, Then said Agrippa unto Festus, This man might have been set at liberty if he had not appealed unto Caesar. So then after this point, you go into Acts chapter 27, they ship him off to Rome, okay, to appeal to Caesar. So, and then at Rome, he was incarcerated for another 2 years. And yet, at the last two verses in the book of Acts, it says that those 2 years were spent in his own hired house. And we know that he was under house arrest in that house. And that's the little church, okay? That's where this revival went out from there, okay? And of course, the Praetorian Guard would have had a great deal to do with it because they were believing, they were Gentile people, just military, and they were believing. So I want to show you something about the law and the code under the Roman Empire for how the punishment for letting a jailer, somebody who's under arrest, if you're a soldier or if you're a jailer and you let that prisoner get away, what the punishment for that would be? It would be death. Okay, so that's why they would have him chained. Now I'll show you this. When Peter was arrested in Jerusalem in Acts 12, you can see this. This would be a provincial province, and the governor there would be the one that ruled in that province under Roman law and Roman, in the Roman Empire, okay? So Acts 12, verse 4 says, And when he had apprehended him, this would be Herod, okay? He would do a provincial governor there. Herod the king stretched forth his hands, okay? And when Herod had apprehended him, Peter, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers, okay? So these would be local provincial soldiers, similar to the Praetorian Guard, okay? They'd be soldiers under the Roman Empire and under Herod's rulership there in the province. He put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him. Okay, so they were under command and by Herod to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people, to the judgment hall. Herod would have had him executed, okay, because Herod had a thing against the movement of the word and the Christians there. Verse 4, Peter therefore was kept in prison, but prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him, okay? So he's kept in prison there, and we know that Peter got out, an angel let him out, okay? And after he got out, in verse 18, let's look at this. Acts 12:18. Now as soon as it was day, there was no small stir among the soldiers, okay? The guys that had been committed to Peter under arrest to keep him, the soldiers, what was become of Peter. And when Herod had sought for him and found him not, he examined the keepers, or the soldiers, the ones that were guarding him, okay, and commanded that they should be put to death, okay. So the punishment for letting a soldier get loose is death, okay, to whoever the soldier was, whoever was guarding him, okay, the jailer or whatever. So when Paul was arrested in Philippi, here's another example of this law they had in Rome, okay, Roman law. Acts 16, verse 12. Let's see, verse 12. And from thence to Philippi, so they're in Philippi, which is the chief city of that part of Macedonia, and a colony, and we were in that city abiding certain days. So this is in Philippi, okay? And Paul gets arrested, okay, verse 23. And when they had laid many stripes upon him, Paul and his companions, they cast them into prison, charging the jailer to keep them safely. Okay, so look what the extremes the jailer goes to keep them so they don't get away. Okay, verse 20, let's see, that was 23. Verse 24, who having received such a charge, okay, thrust them into the inner prison. Okay, he didn't want no chances of them getting away. Okay, and made their feet fast in the stocks. So that pretty well. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know why, if somebody's under arrest, even though, house arrest or whatever, they're going to go to great extremes to make sure that person doesn't escape. Okay, so that's why when we say, when we read those two verses in the last chapter of Acts, where he had his own hired house, okay, he was still waiting. If you read the last chapter of Acts, there's no reference to him actually, describing him going before Caesar. So he was waiting, okay, for the appeal before Caesar, and that's why he was under house arrest and under chains, okay? So that's why he says in bonds, and you'll see that all the way through Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. He says, I'm in bonds, okay? Why? Because he was under house arrest, and they're not going to, give him an inch, to escape, okay? Because the punishment of that is death. Now, in Acts 16, verse 27, now when the keeper found out that the doors had opened, okay, in Philippi there, remember there was an earthquake and all that stuff. God did that because they were praying, singing praises. Verse 27, and the keeper of the prison, awakening out of his sleep and seeing the prison doors open, he drew out his sword and would have killed himself, supposing that the prisoners had been fled. So there it is. Now that is, the Macedonian jailer. Now he may not have been a soldier. He may have been a private citizen that, ran the prison. Okay. He was a jailer, but he was still under the same punishment if he would have let a Roman prisoner escape, okay, he would have been killed. So he was going to kill himself. So anyway, that pretty well establishes the whole thing about, the house arrest, one little church, huge revival. 2,000 years later, we're going through this verse by verse to find out what really was happening in that little house, okay? Why? Because we're in the midst of a revival right now, okay? And we want to know what the dynamics are. We want to know what God will show us. He put it in here for us so that we could know what we're doing, okay? Not just guessing, okay? Just walking by the Spirit and doing whatever, we think we ought to be doing. We want to, we want to go to the instruction manual, okay? God's got it all in here for us. So that's why I wanted to add this, 25-minute additional little bit, in verse 13, okay? Because it's important, okay? We need to have respect for the word, okay, that was left to us the scriptures, okay? We need to have what he's doing is he's restoring purity to the church, okay? It's gotten corrupted. People don't respect what God's given us, okay? And you gotta respect take the first drop before we're gonna get the second, okay? So we've got to, respect the purity of the written word, of the scriptures, and why they were given to us. You understand? There's a purity here. God said his words are pure words. Where is that verse? I think I had it written down here. I was going to share it on the next teaching. Let me get it and I'll show it to you. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, God's restoring purity to the church, and the purest stuff we have is in written form here, okay? And we take diligence, we look at it with respect, and we look for what God has in there for us, okay? So we can be sure of what we're believing, okay? That it's God, okay? God gave it to us. He spoke it to us through our forerunner, Jesus Christ. We've got a forerunner. Psalm 12, this is the one I'm going to close with here. I was just going to just give you the facts, but I want to give you some, the heart behind it. Why I'm doing this, okay? I'm not wasting your time. Psalm 12. He's restoring purity to the church. High places. Getting the bat poop out of the belfry, okay? Our belfries are high, the spirit of our minds, okay? We need to learn to respect the written word, okay? Basically. Because that's what God is commanded us to do. Okay, Psalm 12:6. The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord. Thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever. And then Deuteronomy 29:29 says that the things that are revealed to us, let me read that. Deuteronomy 29:29, God said, the secret things belong unto the Lord our God, not to our imaginations, they belong to him. But those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law. Think about what Jesus Christ did with what the Father gave him to work with. Gave him the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, all the words of the patriarchs, okay? All the words of Moses, the law of Moses, all the words of the prophets of the Old Testament. That's what Jesus had. Look what he did with it. He redeemed us from under, the tyranny of the devil, of the god of this world. He redeemed us. He atoned for us. And all he had was the Old Covenant to do it. It said he won our atonement out of, with the law. Under the law is how he purchased it for us. Now look what we've been given out of the mouth of our forerunner. What the Father gave our Lord Jesus Christ to give to us and have it written, okay? What can we do with it? He's looking at the church now saying, hey, have you figured it out yet? Look, I've called you to do something with what I've given you, okay? You've got everything you need to further this redemption plan, okay? Carry it out. Accomplish something with it, okay? Not mega churches, located in Rome or every city. This revival we're looking at, okay, they did it right in one little house, okay? So that's what we're looking at, the dynamics of it all. And it's interesting, and you just can't get bored with the details, okay? So, because if we're looking at the details that God left us, okay, he said he's going to preserve those things for us. They've been preserved for 2,000 years. We've got a covenant, a new covenant that is ours to make happen, to make work, to do the work with, okay? Look what Jesus did with the old covenant. And we've been given the new covenant to do a work for our Heavenly Father, okay? And we got the perfect forerunner, you know, same yesterday, today, and forever. He's gonna stay where he's there until, you know, the Father sees some action, you know, some revival, some glory coming out of the church, okay? So that's why we're looking at these details, okay? And that's why they're important, and he's restoring purity to the church. We're not talking about sexual purity or anything like that. We're talking about a purity, a spiritual purity, okay? The purity of God, okay? Holiness, the purity of the Spirit of the living God that dwells in us, okay? He's restoring that, okay? So the world can get a good look at it. And the world can then, you know, have an honest opportunity to make a choice, you know, to be reconciled back to God. And, you know, have a real future, okay? For the kind of future that God has, you know, in store for all of us. Alrighty, so that's it. And the next time I teach, it's going to be Philippians 1 and verse 14.